momentum that had been generated in the early years has not stopped, even when 2000, in year 2000, our efforts as partners sort of cut down and, like Anne said, overnight, support stopped. But we saw that even looking at the RWIMs, a threefold increase in number of protected family wells. But then we're still thinking, out of the 13 million people in Zim, and we're talking 70% water coverage, there's still about 2.5, 3 to close maybe to 4 million people unserved by both the communal water point and the upgraded family well. And yet, there's still so much out there that can be done. 75% of the communities are still able to, take up upgraded family wells. So the momentum, you saw the S graph there, threefold increase on this without much support from us partners. It's going down, but it's one of those beautiful things that you want to say, something that was started by government and partners is still going up. And we have a gap in terms of coverage. What should we do? We found that from the interviews, from the focus group discussions, the upgraded family well is very functional. It's still serving. 20 years later, people are still using their oil. And there's a strong ownership of the water point because it's at household level. Of course, it's shared. So even our interviews with about 100 questionnaires targeted at household well owners and about 50 targeted at sharers, so as to assess how it would feel for somebody to own the well and spin-offs, the benefits, and then also for a share, what it implies for the share. We also saw people in action, deepening the wells, following the water table. So we thought, wow, that was climate change, resilience. We actually saw new wells being dug, and we were asking, how are you digging? How's that? I said, my neighbor has their own well, and I'm thinking they're doing quite well. I've now been able to do my own, so that I'm also like, so there's a lot of PA pressure within the house, within the communities. There's also role modeling, and people are emulating the good case that are there for them to see. We also interviewed people, and they were talking about their aspirations to improve. They were saying, yes, we've got the windlass, rope, sometimes it's rope, sometimes it's chain and bucket, but we would want to improve this to another level. But yeah, we looking at that. They had aspirations of taking it up to solar, even some who were able, were talking about putting up a pump there, petrol or diesel pump, so that they get their water up. Of course, what we saw, we did also 200 water quality tests at source and 200 water quality tests at point of use. We discovered, substantially the water, even though it's available, it's not very safe. It's contaminated. We saw, thermotolerant coliforms in 75% of the water points. And I'm talking here of the communal water point, the borehole, because they are in a state of disrepair. They've cracks, they've broken down, no fencing, cattle coming to drink from there. It's open. Even for the upgradable family well, because much of the pictures that probably you've seen now, either maybe one of the upstairs is broken and the windlass is not possible anymore because it's shaking. People resort to using the rope, handling it with their hands, and then throwing the bucket down. And our hands are always, not guaranteed in terms of their safety. But then we also looked at, the level of service. Each of the wells that we got to, we found out that there were about 3 to 4 families that were sharing that well. And one of the, 24/7 things, my water is there. Even if I'm coming from wherever and it's late, but I still need to take a bath, I'm not walking a long distance to try to get water. I'm just within the compound. I'm getting my water and I'm bathing, and that has implications towards general hygiene, access to water. And where some of the wells were well maintained, we saw that even the water tests were revealing 0 coliforms at source. But sometimes you then would find a well that is 0 coliforms at source gets maybe 10 coliforms at point of use. So it speaks about the hygiene processes. What then that told us was that there's great need. We can't just say Zimbabwe has 70% safe water coverage. What we are actually counting is access, not safety. Because the water quality didn't really speak to 70% safe water. Substantially, the water was contaminated. So there's need to break the transmission route of contamination, coming up with a safe water plan. We've got a lot of annexes. I didn't want to bother you with all those. It's cumbersome. It requires one to sit and do the analytics. But we've done the analysis ourselves. The impacts and benefits that we picked from the review was that it was very convenient. People were saying it's convenient. You probably pick that from the video. Somebody saying, if I didn't have this well, I wouldn't have this garden. Because it's difficult. The coverage for communal water points is 1 to 250 households. So it's difficult then to expect 250 gardens around one water point, around one communal water point. It's not sustainable. There's a lot of competition for the water. But when one has their own, then they can have their convenience, privacy. People are saying, if I don't want to meet everyone in the village, I don't just, I stay here at my own home and I draw my own water here. I'm not forced by necessity to go out and maybe forced to greet everyone on the way to the water point. It's very secure for predominantly women. The issues of sexual abuse, harassment, there's no risk for distances. More water for gardening, I've talked about it, and the spin-offs, the nutrition, the livelihoods that were improved, the nurseries that sprouted, and then the other income-generating projects that came out of that because people owned it. Then it speaks to food security. It speaks to health status that improves when people are able to grow their own crops. And people were saying this is not a competition between the family well and the communal water point. It's no competition, it's complementary. Strong emphasis was coming. They were saying, yes, because of the water tables, we did this review in September. And at some of the water points, they were getting just a bucket of water in the morning, and that's it for the day. But then they say, this is convenient, I get my water here, I use it for other chores. But I would then walk the 500 meters to the communal water point for safe water. So there is a complementarity between the two that came out from the community voices. It's not a competition. They're saying, let this work and let this work. I've talked about the resilience to climate change. People kept digging. We were asking them in the questionnaires, when did you last improve your well? You'd find almost every 3-4 years, people would say, yes, I dug a couple meters down. And people were saying, For some, they started getting money as well as the local diggers, the welders, well sinkers, local builders who were trained by Ministry of Health and partners to do that. So that was like employment creation for the whole community in general. And then the human rights to water. People got water at their doorsteps. And they would chase the aquifer, going deeper, still being resilient to the vagaries of the climate. And people were saying we would want, this is not like the optimum, we would want to take it further, improving the lifting devices so that the water becomes more safe, because we saw handling was the biggest challenge. On the water quality testing, there's quite a lot of analytics that we've done, but just to show you briefly here that on the bores that we tested, a lot of, quite a lot of them had 0 coliforms. The deep wells, almost 100% of the deep wells that we tested had 0 coliforms. And traditional wells that we tested, 10% of the traditional wells had 0 coliforms. The upgradable family wells, 20% had 0 coliforms. But then the picture changes as we go there. 1 to 9, which is mild, it shows that there's a risk, but it's a mild risk according to the World Health Organization classification. Some 22% or so of the bores had a mild risk. The deep wells, we didn't get any there because they all had 0 there. About 35-36% of the upgradable family wells had a mild risk. And traditional wells, yes, still in the mild risk category. The moderate to intermediate risk, but all this, according to the World Health classification, this is a risk. You see any water that has that level of contamination, it potentially could degenerate into a disease, into an outbreak. So there's we have quite a substantial number of family wells and traditional wells that are bordering on the potential to degenerate into a disease outbreak because of the levels of contamination. And some of the communal water points, you can look at it at this picture, and if you get a contamination here, you won't be surprised, because this initially, when this was set up, it had a fence around it. But then, because it's 250 households, and no one really owning the point, the fence, develops feet. The cattle come and drink from there, and when cattle come, there's a lot of what dung there, and you wouldn't be surprised if you found contamination at that point. But they are deeper, so they reach out, they provide a bit more water. The water at most of them was of good quality, understandably so, because the water tables are a bit removed from the levels, upper levels, where it's easy to contaminate. But then the challenges that were coming up was that people were not able always to fix it when it breaks down. So the breakdown time was anything between 6 months to a year. And also, when these ones dry up, there's increased demand on that, it wears out. When it wears out, the rains, usually this time of the year, the rains are about to come, people go back to their home, and this one remains broken, of heavy use. Lack of maintenance there. Some of them had very poor yields. People had to walk long distances to get to the water point. Some would queue there. So it was not difficult to sustain that on its own. But people were saying, let's have it in our village as a fallback plan. The Upgradable Family Well has a couple of benefits as well. It was convenient, gardening that I've talked about, income generating activities, food security, access 24/7, health and hygiene improvement because people have access to water, they wash a bit more. But also it had its challenges. The quality, Mr. Mzal, 20 years ago, you set this up, the quality has gone down. They have developed cracks, some of them broken. It's expected, it's wear and tear. Sanitary risks, because also the food soldiers, the environmental health technicians, are not as visible as it was then, who would, make sure this keeps running. And periodically, this needs deepening to chase the water table. I'll ask Andre to walk me through, to walk us through that. So
okay. Thank you. Great. So now we come back.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.